Are you about to start wild camping on a long distance hiking trip and you're wondering about how to pick the best spots and how to do it properly? Then here's my 5 tips on how to start wild camping. Let's go! Hello long distance hikers and long-term world travellers, Russ here bringing you the best tips and inspiration for hiking around the world. I've hiked hundreds of miles along the British coastline, along the South Downs Way in the absolute middle of nowhere, and I prefer hiking solo. An essential part of all of my hiking trips is the fact that I've just got to wild camp. First starting out, I'd have absolutely no idea what I was doing and just wing it, but I've learnt a lot over the last few years, so here's my top 5 wild camping tips. Tip number 1, get a tent that's small, modestly coloured and easy to set up. Now the problem with the UK is that most of the places you're going to be trekking cut through a lot of private land. So you have to take the risk if you're going to do it this way and wild camp on people's land. Yes, you could use a designated paid for campsite, but that's not why we're here in this video. We're here because we want to wild camp, we don't want to have to book anywhere, we don't want to have to camp with anybody, we're purely here to do the wild camping. Using a small tent means that it's going to be stealthy and it means you're going to be able to camp in more places, giving you more options. You could camp in woods where the trees are tightly packed or in bushes or anywhere else like that. Easy to set up means that it's fast and it's going to be very simple to set up in the twilight just before dark. Just before dark is the best time to set up because it's quite dark, you're not in broad daylight, you're not going to bother anyone, and you can still see what you're doing without a head torch. An easier tent to set up means that you're going to be able to set up camp in minutes. You're not going to be faffing around, trying to look for loads of layers of tent to put up, loads of tent poles. You just want something small, very quick to set up. The tent that I will recommend to you, especially for beginners, is of course the tent that I used for a few years, and that is the OEX Phoxx 1 berth tent. I've got a full review and setup video which you can see about here on the screen, so click on that, go and check those videos out. It's a fantastic little tent. The tent that I used for the 100-mile hike of the South Downs Way is the Zpacks Solplex. It's made out of Dyneema, it's very small, it sets up with 2 poles. It's a tension tent, so you just pull it tight and everything works. It's a fantastic tent, a little bit more on the pricier side of tents, but I highly recommend it. Okay, tip number 2, and that is hike solo. Hiking solo means you will be much less conspicuous, you'll be much faster at setting up camp, and you'll of course make a lot less noise. If you're hiking with another person or another 2 or 3 people, you're going to need to each find somewhere to camp individually or find a much bigger campsite, which is much more difficult. If you're camping alone, you'll leave your options wide open so you'll be able to camp in a lot more places. And also, you'll enjoy the solitude much more and have a much more relaxing experience. I suppose I'm biased on that opinion because I just love hiking on my own as opposed to in a group, but there you go. Okay, tip number 3, and that is camp in spots where people are much less likely to see you. I recommend, depending on which trail you're on and where you are on the trail at that time, that you try to camp in wooded areas, areas with lots of bushes, places that have overgrown in some way. What that's going to do is it's going to give you a very kind of enclosed area where you're not going to be able to be seen very easily, and also you'll have a much more comfortable bed of, say, leaves or pine needles. A really easy place to set up camp. You'll be able to put your tent stakes in the ground a lot easier there. So that's my first part of that. If you're unable to find a wooded area, and say you're on the South Downs Way, try to camp in the corners of fields. The corners of fields are really good because you've got an enclosed bushed area behind you and there's only one way to see into your camp. Just make sure that nobody can see you in any houses or anything like that, that the farmer's house isn't like right over there somewhere and looking straight at you. So just be mindful of which corner of which field that you choose. I also recommend, if you can, that you camp at least 50 paces away from the trail. You never know who's going to be walking up and down the trail. In our country, especially in those areas, you're going to get a lot of dog walkers, and the last thing you want is someone coming along, walking their dog, and then reporting you to the landowner or the police. And my last point about picking a good spot to wild camp is know when the sunset is, and about an hour or 2 before the sun sets, start thinking really hard about where you're going to camp. What some people do is they'll plan their campsite spots where they're going to wild camp along the trail, but because you're wild camping, I don't think that's entirely necessary, so long as you give yourself enough time to pick a really good spot. So say you're walking down the trail, you know the sunset's going to set in about 2 hours time, start looking around, looking for wooded areas, places that are going to be really suitable for you to camp, and judge how far away that's going to be. And don't miss that spot. If the sun starts to set and you think it's getting really late and you find a good spot, don't risk it, just camp there, finish there, and you'll be absolutely fine. I did make the mistake on the South Downs Way of walking straight past a really good campsite about an hour before sunset. I thought, nah, it'll be fine, I'll find a really good spot. I've got an entire hour before the sun goes down, and I didn't find anywhere decent, and I ended up camping out in the open about 10 feet away from the actual path. So yeah, it was a little bit sketchy doing that, and I wish I'd camped at the spot about an hour before. So just keep that in mind. Okay, tip number 4, and that is do not light any campfires or use bright headlamps. Lighting a fire is possibly the worst thing you could do if you're planning to wild camp. The amount of light and smoke that's given off is just going to give away your position, and people will dob you in at the first second that they see it. Especially if the landowner sees it, they're going to be like, whoa, there's a freaking fire in my field or in the woods that they own. Just don't do it. The best thing to see what you're doing in the dark when you're wild camping is to use a headlamp with a red light and a dimmer light. Red light is a lot harder to see from a distance in the dark, and if you've got a dimmer on it, you can dim the red light down to just give you enough light to see what you're doing in your tent or when you're cooking your meal on your stove. Okay, tip number 5, and this is kind of like a mixture of 3 tips, and by far the most important tip that I can give you, and that is be considerate, keep it secret, and leave no trace. This goes without saying for all camping situations, environments, but definitely, most importantly, for wild camping on private property. You have to make it look as if nobody has been there at all. When you leave your camp, just make sure that nothing is left behind, that you haven't trampled any flowers, trampled any plants, left any rubbish. Just clean up after yourself extremely well. The last thing that you want is to annoy a landowner and have them report that people are camping there on a regular basis. It's also incredibly important to keep your campsite locations completely top secret at all costs. The last thing you want is tons of people coming to the campsites that you know and love just because you've shared them online or something like that, and then the landowner gets wind of this, and people of the public who walk their dogs get wind of this, and before you know it, there's going to be fences, there's going to be cameras, there's going to be like police or something like that nearby watching the area, and it will ruin the fun for everybody. This is what I like to call a wild camping hotspot, and there are plenty of them on the South Downs Way and along the south coast, where you'll actually get people in buggies or security people walking up and down at particular times of day, especially in the evening. So that was my top 5 tips for wild camping. Above all of these tips are going to keep you safe, they're going to keep the landowner safe, and they're going to keep the environment clean, tidy, and safe as well. Okay folks, campfire question. What is your best wild camping strategies? Let us know down below in the comment section. The Trail Hunter community would love to hear from you. Okay everybody, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, then hit that thumbs up. Do consider watching both of the videos to my side here. If you haven't already, do consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.